Welcome back to Bloops and Barrels. He's Ethan Siegel. I'm Adam Beck. We're back for episode 9. So much softball to talk about. We're getting close to the end of the season. How excited are we for the final stretch?
Beyond excited. We're getting a lot of just high impact matchups every weekend. And as May rolls around, the good softball just keeps on coming. Tournament season, and then we're in full bracketology season as well. I've been paying attention to everything that's happening, not just in the Big Ten, but around the country and how that affects the Big Ten teams. This is the most fun time of the softball calendar.
Well, there's a lot to break down, specifically from this weekend, which is where we'll start. There were 8 series, Maryland winning a series against Illinois. That's a pretty big win for the Terps. Indiana took 2 of 3 at Iowa. And then there were a couple big ones. How about Michigan and Wisconsin? Wisconsin taking 2 of 3 there. Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, let's start there with Wisconsin winning 2 of 3 against Michigan in Madison. And I think on this podcast, Wisconsin has probably been a little bit underlooked in terms of a major NCAA tournament contender. They entered the Sunday game, which is when we're recording on Sunday night. They entered today 38th in RPI, and they fought back from down 8-2, and then later from down 12-11, and ended up winning with a Kaylee Whitten walk-off home run. It was a crazy game. There were 20 total runs scored from the fifth inning on. And just going forward, their next 2 weekends, final 2 weekends, Minnesota and Rutgers, they have a real chance to get to 30 wins overall, 15 Big Ten wins. And I think that's enough to have them firmly in the postseason mix. And it's a team that we just frankly probably have not talked about enough because they don't have a ton of stars. They don't have any stats where they jump out, but they're solid across the board with a ton of very productive hitters. And it's a team that doesn't strike out a ton, and they just continue to pick up quality wins. And I think right now their resume is one of a tournament team.
Well, I think it's more surprising that Michigan didn't win the series. I mean, this is a Michigan team that I think from the beginning of the year we felt like was maybe one step away from joining that elite crew just with the talent they have. But the series at Wisconsin, unable to get it done. I mean, are you concerned about the Wolverines?
I don't want to spoil one of our future segments, but they're definitely a team I'm a little iffy on right now. I'm worried about the pitching. I'm definitely worried about the pitching for Michigan. It's just been a lot of weird inconsistencies all year long with the pitching staff, and they have another big one upcoming this weekend against Indiana that we'll preview at the end of the episode. So I'll save a lot of my Michigan thoughts for that.
Well, Nebraska also took care of business against Minnesota. They swept that series. Ohio State took 2 of 3 against Penn State. Purdue swept Rutgers. Northwestern swept Michigan State. And for me, that was the series that I got the chance to watch a bit of. I don't know if this is like the biggest series in terms of major takeaways, but I really do think Northwestern's turned a corner. I mean, they've won 6 in a row at this point. And after sweeping Penn State last weekend, you started to see some confidence. Emma Ray had a great weekend. She has a great weekend again. Marina Mason's been fantastic. Like this Northwestern team is getting hot at the right time. I'm incredibly excited to see what they look like next week at Purdue. Because that's a series that, two teams kind of on that borderline NCAA tournament, who knows? But whoever wins that series really has an opportunity. But the series that I think was the mainstay coming into the weekend is Oregon and Washington. Oregon taking 3 games against Washington at home. I mean, that is huge for the Ducks.
Yeah, just massive for the Ducks. And let's start with the Ducks side. I think Oregon won this series more than Washington lost this series. For the Ducks, with the wins, they move into the top 10 nationally in RPI. And it was an awesome series for starters for Emma Cox. 3 home runs, 8 RBI, including that grand slam in the first game on Friday that put Oregon atop late in the game. And just another amazing weekend for Elon Butler. Made the game-winning defensive play in right field in the Saturday contest to throw out Gardner at third and end the game. Then 2 solo shots in today's game and a 3-1 win. And I think now, just with the resume, they're a good bet to be a host team with a lot of those advanced metrics looking really good. Yes, they still have UCLA coming up in 2 weekends, but Oregon is rounding into form. Hopefully, they're starting to hammer out some of those inconsistencies that have bothered us so much all year long. But just a huge win for Oregon, and I think they're firmly in the hosting mix. They should be feeling really good. My guess is with the national rankings, they'll probably move into the top 15, maybe the top 12 after sweeping a really good Washington team. So good vibes for the Ducks. Any thoughts on them before we kind of transition and talk about the Huskies?
Well, I think that the way to transition is the way that you started in terms of Oregon won the series. It's not that Washington lost. I mean, all three of these games were really competitive.
Yeah.
An 8-4 game in game one, then a one-run game in game two, and then a two-run game in game three. I mean, Washington was in this series throughout. I just think that from a talent standpoint, Oregon had slightly more, maybe just a tad. And then, Elon Butler just I think it comes down to X factors. When we talk down in the postseason, when we get late in the season, you need big players, big stars, and Elon Butler shows up. So
But
I think
what I will say about that is I thought a lot of the Washington hitters did show up. I think maybe you're right about there being some sort of talent deficit. I think in the sixth and seventh innings of some of those games, I think Oregon made big plays that Washington didn't. But I think you're absolutely right about the close. Washington, to me, they looked like a team that belonged in a series against a team of Oregon's quality. And it will say it's a sweep, but they outhit Oregon on the series, and they only gave Oregon 2 free passes on walks all weekend. And really what it came down to was that Oregon never really struggled on the circle. 11 and 2/3 innings pitched, gave up 16 hits and 10 runs. And listen, I don't think being swept by Oregon is an end all be all because I already mentioned I think they played pretty solid overall. DeBoer had a really good weekend. Alvarez had a really good weekend. And they were on the road against a really good Ducks team. But at the end of the day, you fall from first to fourth in the Big Ten standings. You have UCLA next weekend, so you can expect that you're not going to make up that ground that you just lost. And I think they'll probably end up now as the second best team in a regional hosted by an SEC team who will probably be pesky. If you're an SEC team, you're probably not happy to have Washington in your draw, but I think they're no longer the hosting threats we thought that maybe they had a chance to be going in.
And I think they have an opportunity to change that narrative next week. And we'll get into that a little bit later on in this episode. But they've got 3 games against UCLA at home. So that definitely plays
They've
into
been an
that.
awesome home team all year long.
And that's kind of the case with Washington sports, like across the board. It seems like they're always really good at home, and then away from home, they just like can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving along to as we look deeper into the season, the last couple weekends, there's 2 weekends left. And in terms of big storylines, we're going to each pick up 3 big storylines. Do we want to go number three, and then go to number
Yeah,
two?
let's do that. Let's do a alternating countdown.
Okay, so what is your third biggest storyline to watch heading into the last 2 weekends of the season?
I am fascinated to see if anyone separates themselves in the conversation for the Big Ten Freshman of the Year award. We did our midseason awards podcast about a month ago at this point, and we mentioned a lot of the names that are in the conversation. And to me, it's only become more cluttered. I think there are 3 main candidates who all have really, really good resumes, and that starts with Marina Mason, the Northwestern pitcher. You mentioned her just a little bit ago. She picked up another 3 wins this weekend against Michigan State, her 4th and 5th shutouts of the year. And now she's up to 3rd in the conference in ERA, behind only Lindsey Grine and Jordy Fromm. She's 5th in strikeouts. She's tied for best batting average against in the conference. And now Northwestern has moved all the way up to 6th in the Big Ten standings, and it's largely because of her. She's got a great case, as does Nebraska's Alexis Jensen in the circle. Nebraska, with Washington losing, moved into 1st in the standings, and Jensen has an 18-2 record on the year, which is just that is one of the key stats. I think 18 wins is probably the stat that you look at when you try and make Jensen's case, but that's supported by a 2.55 ERA. That's top 10 in the conference. She's 2nd in strikeouts, 1st in strikeouts per 7 innings, and then top 5 in all the other important pitching categories and batting average against and whip. And then if you go to the offensive side of the ball, Allison Oneacre continues to rake for Penn State. She's been the best player on a Penn State team that's fallen off a little bit in terms of standings. I no longer think they're a postseason team, so maybe you get a hit from the narrative element, but she's been fantastic. She leads all freshmen in the conference in OPS, leads all freshmen in the conference in walks, and she's hit 16 homers, another 10 doubles, and she's 5th in the conference in total RBI. And this isn't even mentioning UCLA's Alina Garcia or Bria Alejandra, Purdue's Anna Moore, or Washington's Casey Burdick, who I think over the next 2 weekends could totally vault themselves into the conversation. I think this race is wide open, and I honestly don't know where I'm leaning with 2 more weekends to play.
I think I lean towards Alexis Jensen. And the reason I think I lean towards her is because of the narratives. At the end of the day, these awards are statistical, but they're also narrative based. And Alexis Jensen has been part of the best 1-2 punch in all of college softball in the circle, and she's dominated. She's been fantastic. And for a freshman to be tasked with what she has had to do from a workload perspective is unmatched across the conference. So for me, that is where my pick goes.
I
But there's
agree. I think that's who I would maybe guess is going to win it. But if I had a vote, which I don't, to be clear, I think my vote would actually go toward Marina Mason right now. And that is even trying to put aside the Northwestern bias, just because where are they in the Big Ten standings without Marina Mason? 12th, 13th? Like, she has been such a huge part of their success this year. And I don't think you can say quite the same about Alexis Jensen, as good as she's been, because of the other talent that Nebraska has in terms of their pitching staff.
Well, in terms of the top talents in this conference, I'm curious how many teams get into the NCAA tournament. Last year, the Big Ten had 8 teams. This year, they've got 9 teams within the top 50 of the RPI heading into Sunday, and things are going to change slightly, but those 9 teams will still be in the top 50. Northwestern came in at 47. Last year, they made the tournament at 48. So that is, I think, the one that I'm just very interested in. They don't quite have the quality wins that they did last year. And then you've got this bunch of Purdue, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin coming into Sunday, ranked all between 34 and 38. And I'm interested to see where Michigan drops to after dropping the series against the Badgers. The 4 teams that
Indiana,
are
I think we should expect to fall a little bit too after dropping the Sunday game to Iowa.
yes, yes. The 4 teams that are most definitely in Oregon, UCLA, Nebraska, and Washington. But how many of those other teams that are on the fringe get in? That's what's really important the last 2 weekends of the season. And then also, how much does the Big Ten tournament come in and play a factor? Remember, in these Big Ten tournament games, it's one game. It's you win or you're done. And we saw a team like Michigan, who was very talented last year. Lauren Drukowski was awesome in West Lafayette. But could there be one of those middle of the pack teams that has an upset run and then maybe steals a spot? So I think all those storylines are really interesting to watch for.
Right now, Adam, if I set the over-under, 6.5 Big Ten teams make the tournament, you going over or under?
I think I'm going under. I think I'm going 6.
I think I'm going over, so we'll come back to it. I think it'll be 7. And the more I think about it, the more I just think the committee is going to be pretty forgiving with the Big Ten. I think 7 teams, maybe even 8, end up pushing to get into the tournament. But what you just talked about is a good segue into my number 2 storyline to watch, and that is what team is going to be hot going into the Big Ten tournament. Yes, of course, we're thinking about the NCAA tournament all the time, but also as a Big Ten softball podcast, the Big Ten tournament is maybe the most fun week of the season. And I think there's just, you already mentioned the 1-game samples, one and done. There's some randomness that can be generated from that. Last year, 12-seeded Purdue won 2 games. 8-seeded Michigan went all the way. A year before that, in 2024, 8-seeded Indiana made the championship game. So there's a lot of randomness, and I'm just curious who's going to go in red hot. And I think also just in terms of the format and the standings, top 12 make it. First 4 get a bye. We think we know who those top 4 are going to be, but I think it sets up right now where I think being that 5 seed is a huge advantage, because I think there's a big tier break after the top 11 teams, where that 12th team is an Iowa or a Minnesota and a Rutgers. So being the 5 seed and getting to draw that in the first round and then likely get to play Washington in the second round, I think is really big. Right now, it looks like Indiana and Northwestern battling for the 5 seed, but a few other teams could be in the mix. But then also, just I talk about the randomness. I could see a team like a Michigan, a Northwestern, a Wisconsin, just based on who they have on the schedule these last 2 weekends, entering the tournament in College Park with just tons of momentum on their side.
And that's really important as you look down the stretch. I mean, it's all about how can you get hot at the right time. Well, speaking of heat and players being hot, I mean, there are some stats right now across the conference that are unbelievable. And something that I'm watching for is the Big Ten regular season average leaderboard. All time, the all-time record for a Big Ten program, technically not a Big Ten team at the time, was UCLA back in 2002. Stacey Newman hit 529 across an entire season. So that is the Big Ten all-time season record. Well, right now, there are 2 players in the Big Ten that are at that mark or better. Mariah Poehler is way ahead, 570. She should be able to clear that. But Jordan Woolery is batting exactly 529, the same mark as Newman did all the way back in 2002. So I'm curious if Woolery is able to beat that record, but I'm also curious if we could potentially have 2 players finish the year essentially on top of that 529 mark. Some of the offense across the conference has been ridiculous. It's been, of course, led by UCLA, but for Mariah Poehler to be batting 570, are you kidding me?
And it's not just slap hitting either. I mean, she's up there in the conference in terms of doubles, the speed, the stolen bases. She's having one of the all-time memorable, fun, unique seasons for a Big Ten player, and it would just be the perfect capper to have her be forever enshrined as the Big Ten average leader.
And I think she's like over 80 hits at this point. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's
It's great. I
unbelievable.
think she got her 200th career hit, I believe, this past weekend. But you mentioned the name Jordan Woolery, and I think that's a really good segue into my number one storyline that I'm watching the rest of the way. Uh, is in large part because of her. Because when we did our midseason award show, Adam, we were pretty quick to anoint Megan Grant our midseason Big Ten Player of the Year. And I don't know if you saw what Jordan Woolery did this past weekend, but I think it might be a wide open race. Woolery, for clarification, in the doubleheader against Cal in Saturday, went 6 for 6 across 2 games, 4 home runs, and 10 RBI, and she became the fifth player ever in the history of college softball to record 100 RBI in a season. By the end of the regular season, she'll easily get to third on the list. By the end of the total season, she'll likely get to second, and she could really have a chance to chase Laura Espinosa's record of 132. She has 30 more runs batted in than any other player in the Big Ten. Right now, 70 is second with Megan Grant. And now between Megan Grant and Jordan Woolery, I think it's a really fascinating race as Woolery is just now 1 home run behind Grant, 30-31, and Woolery maintains a strikeout rate under 6%. She's hitting .529 in terms of batting average, which is better than Megan Grant, and is just sniffing those metrics, still right behind Megan Grant in both on-base percentage and OPS. It's super close, and yet I still also don't want to forget about Jordy Fromm in this conversation, because in terms of overall value, the player who is fourth offensively in OPS and first in ERA by a mile, 1.36 ERA for Fromm, with a conference-leading 9 saves for the team that we think is going to win the Big Ten regular season title based on their schedule the rest of the way, and they've played the number one non-conference strength of schedule. In terms of value, why would it not be Jordy Fromm? So I think it's just a really exciting, compelling race, and I have no idea where I would personally vote if the season ended today.
And if Megan Grant has a really hot last 2 weeks of the season, like she's 100% in that conversation as well.
I think Grant still might be the leader in the conversation.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I
I
just think it's a 3 horse race now, and I think it's a really it's like picking your favorite child. They're all so amazing. They've all had such great seasons, and I don't know. I don't know.
Well, speaking of Grant and Woolery, I think the home run race between them is really interesting. The program record for UCLA is 31. I'm bringing up Stacey Newman again. She did that in 1999. Megan Grant tied that this weekend, and Jordan Woolery is just one away, as you mentioned, with 30 of them. Um, who is going to end up winning this home run race? I mean, if Jordan Woolery keeps on hitting 7 home runs in a weekend, like that's going to happen. Like she's got it. But genuinely, for the pack and the duo to hit 61 home runs on the year and to be one home, it's unreal. Like they're playing on rookie mode.
We're bordering on the territory where UCLA has 2 hitters who it is smartest to intentionally walk every time they're up at the plate, which obviously is not the correct strategy, but it's just bananas. And while you mentioned home run records and chases, I'm also just kind of fascinated. UCLA, I think, is a few home runs behind Oklahoma for the national lead, but I think they're actually in front of Oklahoma in terms of home runs per game, and it's going to come down to the final weekend of the season. So that's an interesting chase to watch as well.
And who knows if they meet each other in the postseason?
I think there's a real chance based on how those 2 teams have been playing as of late.
Well, let's just drop back to next weekend. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Lots of Big Ten slates on the schedule. Iowa, Nebraska, a little fun series between those two teams. Indiana and Michigan meeting up in Ann Arbor, Maryland at Michigan State, Northwestern at Purdue, which we talked about. Really big, important series between those two teams. Ohio State at Oregon, Penn State at Illinois, and then UCLA at Washington.
Don't
In
forget about
terms of
Wisconsin,
those,
Minnesota. That's one worth mentioning too.
yes, Wisconsin and Minnesota. I don't know why I just like completely missed that.
Yeah,
Um,
the one that stands out to me, I think there's a clear headliner with some of more of those West Coast teams, but Indiana, Michigan is just so important. We already mentioned those are 2 teams. You said in that clump in the mid-30s in RPI, they came into Sunday 35 and 36, which is right on the postseason line, in my opinion. And both teams suffered really brutal Sunday losses. We already talked about Michigan choking the lead to Wisconsin. Indiana, just another one of those pesky conference losses to a team that is inferior in the standings. It's kind of been a trend for Indiana all year long. And Indiana, those first 2 games against Iowa were close. One went to extra innings. Another one was a low-scoring game that the Hoosiers were able to eke out. And I think the winner of this Indiana-Michigan series can probably feel pretty good about their postseason chances, and the loser probably has a little bit more work to do. And Indiana has not been great on the road, which is a big factor because this series is in Ann Arbor. And I already talked about how this past weekend in Iowa City, those are those were all sweat-inducing games for their fans. And I also already talked about the importance of the 5 seed, and right now it's Indiana who holds that going into the Big Ten tournament. And I just think Michigan is probably the better roster on paper, but weirdly, we've now hit a point where I think I trust Indiana's pitching more, which if you told me that preseason, I would have thought you were crazy. And I think Indiana can follow a similar game plan to what Wisconsin just laid out for how to beat Michigan. I think if anything, Indiana and Wisconsin play pretty similar styles, except Indiana has a little more star power, a little more souped up talent. And I think Wisconsin just took the series from Michigan, and Indiana could very well do the same thing. But it's just a important series in the second to last weekend of Big Ten play.
And Ethan, just I just want to talk a little bit more about this Michigan team while we're on the topic. But I just right now they're sitting at 7-11 in conference play.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't see how they make the NCAA tournament with a losing conference record. I don't care who they've played.
I think that is a genuinely fair argument to bring up. And I think Michigan, obviously, I think they play Michigan State the final weekend of the season. So that will help their case if hopefully they can snag 3 wins. But you need to win the series against Indiana to then push it for a 500 record in conference play. I think that's a fair criticism, but also I think SOS is going to play in their favor because a large part is a lot of those losses are to really good teams. 3 losses to Washington, 3 losses, was it to Nebraska or to UCLA that they played early in the season?
Nebraska.
To Nebraska. So just really tough conference schedule to Michigan, and you don't get to play every team in the Big Ten. You get, what is it, 8 weekends of Big Ten play, and there are 16 teams in the conference, so it's kind of luck of the draw, and Michigan pulled the short straw this year, and if they're still able to get close to 500 with some really good advanced metrics, maybe.
Who knows? I think that'll be really interesting. That's going to be something that we'll definitely talk about as we get closer to the season. The other huge series, I think, is UCLA-Washington, and Washington coming off being swept by Oregon this weekend. They're 15-3, UCLA 16-2 in conference play. And that series being at Washington makes it really interesting because I think if the series is at UCLA, we're like, Washington's going to put up a really good fight. It's going to be some close games, but UCLA probably sweeps. Maybe they take 2 of 3. But because this series is at Washington, this is a huge opportunity for the Huskies. You mentioned they played really, really well at home so far this season. I mean, they're excellent. 9-0 at home in conference play. They're 34-12 overall in the season, 11-0 overall at home throughout the entire slate. This is a team that has not lost at home yet. And for a really good UCLA team to come in to Seattle, who knows? If Washington's able to take 2 of 3 in the series, then they're right back on the conversation of.
Do you think that'll happen though?
No, but it could. Like
It could,
it very
yes.
could. And I think that means it's a series to watch this weekend.
I certainly agree. And speaking of UCLA, we actually had a viewer comment last week. I want to shout out Dancing Dave, who asked about the Bruins, who it seems like he's a fan of.
Our first comment.
And please keep them coming if you're listening and watching the podcast. But he asked where we think UCLA would be ranked if they still had their projected pitching staff of Caitlin Terry, Addison Fisher, and Taylor Tinsley before the transfer portal stole Fisher and Terry from the Bruins. And if they had that triumvirate, I mean, I think they're the best team in the Big Ten, and I think they have a real case as the best team in the country.
They're a top 3 team in the country, for sure.
I honestly, my instinct is to say they're number 1.
Yes, because if you look at what Caitlin Terry has done this year with Texas Tech, it is unbelievable. Yeah. And then Addison Fisher has put in a really good year at Georgia as well. I mean, those 2 arms have been better than Taylor Tinsley, and that's been the storyline the entire season. I mean, Tinsley even struggled in a game this weekend, but UCLA has enough bats that it doesn't matter. But I swear, if they had those 2 pitchers next to Taylor Tinsley, this team would legitimately have no holes.
It'd be terrifying. Speaking of Taylor Tinsley, just an episode full of great segues. We always like to end our episodes talking about the best thing we saw in the Big Ten this week, and Taylor Tinsley is included in mine. Adam, I don't know if you've started to see across college softball. The Athletes Unlimited, the AUSL Pro Softball League, has started giving out golden tickets for players who are selected into their draft pool. And this weekend, 4 Big Ten players got given golden tickets, 3 coming from UCLA, including Taylor Tinsley, and then the aforementioned duo of Megan Grant and Jordan Woolery. And then for Oregon, after the Sunday game, Amari Harper got a golden ticket, and the Oregon one was announced by Sabrina Ionescu. The UCLA one was announced by softball legends Jen Schroeder and Natasha Watley. And it's just so fun I love the way they're doing this. this. The teammates go nuts, the players go nuts, the fans go nuts. I get the clips on social and I go nuts. I think it's just an awesome tradition, and it creates more viral moments around softball, and hopefully brings more eyes to the pro game, because there are so many great college softball players who run out of eligibility, and then hopefully people watch as their careers continue in this hyper competitive league, and it's just so exciting to see these moments.
And I think it's really important for the sport as well as it continues to grow. And we've really seen that over the last couple of years, even just from a ratings perspective. If you look at the Women's College World Series versus, the Men's
You
College
look
World
at last weekend, Texas, Oklahoma, which frustratingly got moved off of ESPN right before a basketball game. And so the end of that one was on ESPN News, which was terribly frustrating. But the ratings for that series were really through the roof. It was awesome.
It's awesome to see. It's truly awesome to see. The best thing I saw on the Big Ten this week, got to give a shout out to Jordan Woolery. You mentioned the stat lines earlier, so I had to go in a different direction. Gonna shout out Sydney Supley here. She went on Big
Friend of
Ten
the pod,
today.
Sydney Supley.
Friend of the pod, Sydney Supley. She went on Big Ten today earlier this week, and she talked about Megan Grant's heat map. And if you haven't seen this, you should look up her account on Twitter at Sydney_Supley. Megan Grant's heat map is all red in the strike zone.
It's so
there was
funny.
there was like a tiny bit of like green and yellow at the very top, just like a peak of green and yellow. But the entire zone is all red. You throw it in the zone, it's a home run. That is what Megan Grant has done this year. She has been unbelievable, and to see that graphic, I just think tells the entire story, because, from an analytics perspective, I'm kind of like that analytics junkie. I love stats. I love the ability to like visualize data, and something like that just tells you and puts it into perspective how good Megan Grant has been. So when you bring up earlier in this podcast, like, we're going to get to a point in the season where it is better, and teams are already doing this, but it's better to intentionally walk Jordan Woolery and Megan Grant than pitch them. It's genuinely Barry Bonds from 25 to 26 years ago.
It's awesome. I absolutely. Is she your answer? Is she still your favorite for Big Ten Player of the Year?
If she ends up having the most home runs in the conference, yes.
Okay, good to know.
With that, that's going to wrap us up for today. As always, remember to like and subscribe. Follow us on X at Bloops Barrels, and on Instagram's Bloops and Barrels. Remember to also comment down below any questions. We'll answer them. We love them. Once again, another shout out to Dancing Dave Q2X. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the questions. We love all the support. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.